loop. I'm sorry I couldn't come on Friday, but I have trouble walking.
Right.
I'm going to the doctor though
When are you going to the doctor?
on Thursday. My friend
Thursday.
is coming Wednesday from Cincinnati and she's gotten a hotel room so I can get away from this place. I also
Oh,
have a
nice.
reinfestation of the bed bugs.
Oh, that's no fun.
Now they took everything out of my room and I have a ton of books, a ton of clothes, and they sprayed it, but I found five since then.
Ay vey.
But they don't
That's
have
no
to.
fun at all.
What?
So that does not sound fun at all.
You have to call Maritza, I guess, and ask her about the activity room, if we can have the meeting in there.
Yeah, we probably should. Probably a
I
good
think
idea.
I think she'll do it
Mm-hmm.
for a religious thing.
Yeah, should be fine.
Okay, well, thank you for everything.
You're welcome.
How are
And
you?
good morning, Zalman.
Morning.
And good
I
morning.
told
Is
you,
Susie there as well?
Morning, Rabbi. Good morning.
Good morning, Susie. And good morning, Joan.
Good morning, Rabbi. How are you?
Baruch Hashem. Brett, was there something you wanted to ask before we jump right in?
I forgot already.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. Okay, as we're opening and loading the shared screen, let's say our blessing together. Baruch
Gata,
Atah Adonai
Adonai,
I,
Eloheinu
Elohim,
Elohim,
melech
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 Haolam,
haolam
Haolam,
asher
Asher,
Asher,
kiddushanu
Deshanu,
Kiddushanu,
b'mitzvosav
Mitzvah,
Levitzvanu,
v'tzivanu
Tivanu,
Tivanu,
al
Al,
Al,
divrei
Divrei,
Divrei,
Torah.
Sorah,
Torah.
And I made a blessing on the water before, but I'm going to say l'chaim, everyone.
L'chaim.
So we've been discussing the times, the correct times for prayer. And we are up to, I lost my place over here. Um, okay, let's recap the last part that we learned because it'll be necessary for what we're going into today. So just to refresh our memories. We learned in the Mishnah that the rabbis hold that the afternoon prayer may be recited until the evening. Rabbi Yehuda says it may be recited only until the midpoint of the afternoon, which is 1 hour and 15 halachic minutes before sunset. Rav Chisda said to Rav Yitzchak there with regard to the morning prayer, Rav Kahana said that the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Since we learned the Mishnah in the preferred tractate Adios, which we're going to get to much later, in accordance with his opinion. So here, what is the ruling? Is the ruling like Rabbi Yehuda? Because we know that the ruling, when it comes to the morning prayers, goes according to Rabbi Yehuda, who says you have until 4 hours of the day. Or is the ruling like the rabbis who say that you can go until the evening? So he was silent and said nothing to him, as he was familiar with no established ruling in this matter. He wasn't sure what the answer is. So Rav Chisda said, let's try and see. Let's see if we can try and resolve this ourselves from the fact that one time Rav, who was a teacher, prayed the Shabbat prayers on the eve of Shabbat while it was still day. So if you can say the evening prayers before nightfall, what does that mean? That it's no longer the time for the afternoon prayer, right?
Okay.
If you can say the evening prayers, then it's no longer afternoon, it's already evening. So from the fact that Rav prayed the Shabbat prayers on Friday afternoon before nightfall, that must teach us that the time for afternoon prayers must end an hour and 15 minutes before sunset. So learn from this that the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, and the time for the afternoon prayer ends at the midpoint of the afternoon, after which time one may recite the evening prayer.
Why would he, Rabbi?
Mm-hmm.
Why would he say the Shabbat evening prayers if it was still afternoon?
That's a good question. That's a good question. Can you remember a time when you said the Shabbat evening prayers while it was before nightfall?
Yes.
When we had the community Shabbat dinner here, we had candle lighting, and straight after candle lighting, we did the evening prayers. We didn't wait until nightfall. So perhaps it was something like that. He needed to get the evening started. He needed to have his maybe a guest. I'm not sure, but it's a good question. Why did he say that? Why did he do the after?
He said it after the candles were lit, right?
This would be after the candles were lit, yeah.
Well, that might explain it. If the candles have to be lit before Shabbat because you can't make the fire. And if
Correct.
the candles are lit, then it's already considered Shabbat evening.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's also in certain places over here in Florida it doesn't get too bad. But there are some places where, let's say in Manchester, England, where nightfall sometimes could be 10, 11 o'clock. Or, so could be very late if you're going to wait all the way until then. If you'd be able to say your prayers at 8:30 or 9 o'clock instead, would be a lot easier than staying up until 11. So the Gemara immediately rejects the proof based on Rav's practice. On the contrary, from the fact that Rav Huna and the sages, students of Rav, would not pray until evening, they waited, learn from that the halacha is not accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, because they waited specifically. So the Gemara concludes, now that the halacha was stated neither in accordance with the opinion of this sage, nor in accordance with the opinion of that sage. In other words, we don't know, and we have case material to prove both ways. One who acted in accordance with the opinion of this sage has acted legitimately, and one who acted in accordance with the opinion of that sage has acted legitimately, as this halacha is left to the decision of each individual. If you want, you can go according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, and if you want, you can go according to the opinion of the rabbis. One thing that you cannot do is go according to both opinions at the same time. What would it mean to go to both opinions at the same time?
Is it possible?
You tell me.
Uh-huh. Because then you'll be saying each prayer twice. Right?
How is
So,
it possible to say each prayer once and be going according to both opinions? In other words, going according to neither this one nor that one, mixing the two opinions together.
Not.
Should I give you the answer?
uh-huh.
Please.
Say it's already less than an hour and a quarter before the evening, and you haven't yet prayed your afternoon prayers. So now you want to go according to the rabbis and still be allowed to pray the afternoon prayers. If you've done that, you're not allowed to pray the evening prayers until nightfall. So you can have one day that you go according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda and one day according to the opinion of the rabbis, but you can't mix them both on the same day. So when we were praying in the afternoon before nightfall, I had to make sure to say the afternoon prayers earlier, so that way you would, because if you're saying that that within an hour and 15 minutes of sunset is still the afternoon, and you're allowed to say the afternoon prayers, then it's not the time of nighttime prayers. You're not allowed to say the night prayers.
That's not nice.
So, according to Rambam, who made the book of the accepted practices, which one does he go with?
So today, the accepted opinion today is that you could do either one, but you can't do both. So most people will have evening prayers, afternoon prayers, within an hour and a quarter of most people will pray right before sunset, or some people will pray earlier just out of choice, out of preference, but not because of the halachic ruling. However, if they're looking to pray the evening prayers early, which happens, there are many communities where they bring in Shabbos early so that they don't have to wait up all the way late to put their kids to bed and things like that, right? You want to have a Shabbos meal with your kids, so they bring in Shabbos early. So in those communities where they do that, they make sure to pray the afternoon prayers extra early in the day, so they won't run into a problem of mixing the two opinions together.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So it's a good question. And it's until today, you can they both ways are legitimate, and you can choose which one you want on any given day. You don't have to choose one and be set for life like that. You can choose whichever one you want. Okay, here comes a story time. The Gemara relates, Rav happened by the house of the sage Geniva, and he prayed the Shabbat prayer on the eve of Shabbat before nightfall. So this is the same Rav that we learned about before. He was praying the Shabbat evening prayers, and he was praying them before nightfall. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba was praying behind Rav. So when we start our prayers, we start our standing prayer by taking 3 steps back and then 3 steps forward. When we end our prayer, we also end by taking 3 steps back and 3 steps forward. So I guess it must have been a small room, and Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba was praying behind Rav. Rav finished his prayer, but he couldn't take his 3 steps back because that would interrupt the prayer of Rabbi Yirmiyah. Imagining in a squished space, everyone has to wait for the guy in the back to finish so that they can all take their 3 steps back. So from this story, we can derive 3 halachas from this little story. Number 1, we derive from this that one may pray the Shabbat prayer on the eve of Shabbat before nightfall. Number 2, we can derive from this that a student is allowed to pray behind his rabbi, because Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba was the student of Rav. And number 3, derive from this that it is prohibited to pass before those who are praying. You're not allowed to walk in front of someone who's praying because that will interrupt them. The Gemara responds, this supports the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. As Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, it is prohibited to pass before those who are praying. The Gemara asks, is that so? Didn't we have the great teachers, Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi, who were passing before those who were praying? Right? They walked into the shul, or I don't know where they were, what the story was there, but they were walking in front of the people who were praying. So the Gemara responds, Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi were beyond 4 cubits from those who were praying when they passed. And that's already not considered a disturbance. If you're 6 feet away from someone and you're walking past them, that's not going to disturb them so much.
With social distancing.
One particular detail is surprising. How did Rabbi Yirmiyah act that way and pray behind Rav, his teacher? Didn't Rav Yehuda say in the name of Rav that a person should never pray directly next to his rabbi, presumptuously indicating that he is his rabbi's equal, and you shouldn't pray behind his rabbi as it creates the impression that he is bowing to him. And it was taught in a brisa in a more extreme manner, as Rabbi Eliezer said, one who prays behind his rabbi, and one who greets his rabbi without waiting for his rabbi to greet him first, one who returns his rabbi's greeting without saying greetings to you, rabbi, one who rivals his rabbi's yeshiva, meaning establishes a yeshiva of his own, and teaches during his rabbi's lifetime without his rabbi's consent, and one who says something in the name of his rabbi which he did not hear directly from his rabbi, these things cause the divine presence to withdraw from Israel. So how could it be that this student was praying behind his rabbi? With regard to Rabbi Yirmiyah's
if you can't pray behind them, you can't pray next to them, and I'm assuming you can't pray in front of them because that wouldn't be proper. What else is there?
aha, Zalman is asking the $1,000,000 question. If you can't pray next to your rabbi, you can't pray in front of your rabbi, and you can't pray behind your rabbi, where are you supposed to pray? Who wants to give an answer?
Unless you're 6 feet away, 4 cubits.
Okay, that's one good answer if he was more than 4 cubits away. What's another one?
Are you allowed to ask the rabbi's permission to stand next to him?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I wonder. There's another possibility, which is if you're behind him but offset. So if you're not directly behind him, but you're off to the side, then that's not giving the impression that you're bowing down to him anymore. Another option would be if there would be, benches or tables in between. That's a good question. With regards to Rabbi Yirmiyah's contact, the Gemara explains that Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba was different, as he was not a mere student of Rav, rather he was a disciple colleague, and was therefore permitted to act that way. So here we're introducing a new terminology that we've never met before called a disciple colleague. Anybody want to explain what is a disciple colleague?
Someone who follows the rabbi with excellent practice?
Good, but that's not the answer that I'm looking for.
A very advanced student.
Very close. So he would be, he started off as a student and then was very advanced and ended up becoming a peer. So you can have also like certain professors in the university. You can have someone, he started out as a student, but he excelled so much and he ended up becoming a professor as well. And together, they learn from the great authorities of the time. So he started out as a disciple and became a colleague. And that explains also why on one occasion when Rav prayed the Shabbat prayer early, Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Rabba asked him, did you distance yourself from labor and accept the sanctity of Shabbat? And Rav said to him, yes, I distanced myself. But Rabbi Yirmiyah said to him, let's look at the words again. He said, did you distance yourself? And he did not say to him, did the master distance himself, as would have been appropriate had he been merely Rav's student. So from the fact that he spoke to him with such comfortable terms, we see from here that he must have been on the same level and able to speak to him more colloquially and more casually. Anyone here speak Yiddish? There's a joke, but it only works in Yiddish because I don't even know if there's a way.
Say it in Yiddish so we can hear the Yiddish.
Say it in Yiddish. There was a guy and he was in a court and the judge ruled against him. So he said to the judge, "Du bist aferd," which translates as "you are a horse." And the judge says, "Excuse me? That's how you speak to the judge?" He says, "Anschuldig mir, ihr seid aferd," which translates as, "I apologize. His Excellency is a horse." Okay. So now we're going to go in and delve into that story itself. So he said, if you're already praying the Shabbat services, right? You're praying the Shabbat evening services. Have you accepted the sanctity of Shabbat upon yourself? Have you distanced yourself from labor? So although Rav replied that he had distanced himself from labor, did he indeed need to distance himself from labor? In other words, can you say the Friday night, the Shabbat prayers, and still be involved in all the the electricity and lighting fires and things like that if the night has not yet arrived? Didn't Rabbi Ovin say once Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi prayed the Shabbat prayer on the eve of Shabbat before nightfall? So he prayed early. He then entered the bathhouse, which is something that is usually not allowed on Shabbos, and emerged and taught us our chapters that we had learned, and it was not yet dark. So he already had already prayed the Shabbat prayers, and yet here he is going into the bathhouse. So what's going on? Rava said that is a case where he had entered the bathhouse to perspire. And it was before the sages issued a decree prohibited perspiring in a bathhouse on Shabbat. He didn't go to take a bath. He went there to take a little sauna. He went there to get sweaty. Sorry?
That's fit.
Oh, very good. So we do speak Yiddish. He went
Few
for the
words.
schwitz. He went to take a schwitz, and that was permitted on Shabbos in those days. The Gemara asks another question. Is it so that he was required to refrain from labor? Didn't Abaye permit Rav Dimi bar Levai to fumigate baskets with sulfur, even though he had already recited the Shabbat prayer, indicating that it is permitted to perform labor even after the Shabbat prayer, because fumigating baskets with sulfur would not be permitted on Shabbos. Why would people be fumigating their baskets with sulfur? Is that like a bug spray? Pesticide? At any rate, apparently people used to fumigate their baskets with sulfur. So the sulfur would be burning or hot, and it would the smoke would go up. So that has to do with a fire. Is obviously not allowed on Shabbos. And he had already recited the Shabbat prayer. It was not yet dark, and he was permitted to perform this labor. The Gemara responds, no. He had made a mistake. What was the story there? You missed a part of the story. And this is something that we've spoken about before. Rav Dimi did not intend to begin Shabbat early. It was a cloudy day, and he mistakenly thought that the sun had set, and that was why he prayed. So consequently, even though he prayed, the Shabbat prayer did not obligate him to conduct himself in accordance with the sanctity of Shabbat, and he was allowed to perform labor even after his prayer. In other words, he wasn't planning on accepting Shabbos. He just thought that Shabbos had already come. So since he accepted Shabbos by mistake, and then the sun came back out and he realized, oh, it's not yet nighttime, so he went to ask the rabbi, and the rabbi said, yes, you're allowed to finish fumigating your baskets. So if anybody has their clock is off, right? Let's say you forget to change the clocks. You say, oh, it's time for candle lighting. So you say your prayers, and then you realize that the clock was changed, and you call the rabbi. The rabbi may permit you to continue fumigating your baskets. The Gemara goes on to ask, 1 second, can a mistake be reversed? Go on.
Rabbi, do you then say the prayers over again?
Oh, that's a good question. From here, it doesn't say, but it's from the wording, it seemed as though he did not have to pray again. But it's a good question. I was wondering the same thing. I don't yet know. Maybe we'll find out soon.
Okay.
The Gemara goes on to ask, can a mistake be reversed, enabling one to conduct himself as if he had not yet prayed? In other words, at the end of the day, whether he meant to accept the Shabbat or he did not mean to accept the Shabbat, he prayed. He prayed the Shabbos prayers. So how could it be that he's now allowed to do this work? Didn't Avidan, a student of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, say that once the sky became overcast, leading the people to think that it was the dark of night? They entered the synagogue and recited the evening prayer of the conclusion of Shabbos on Shabbos. And later, the clouds cleared and the sun shone, indicating that it was still day, but they already said the evening prayers. And they came and they asked Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, what should they do? And he said, since they've already prayed. They don't need to pray a second time. Even though they prayed erroneously, they thought that it was nighttime, but it was really day, and their prayer was made in error. Their mistake is not reversible, and what was done remains. So, by inference over here in our case, since he already accepted the Shabbos, so presumably he should not be allowed to do any labor afterwards, even though it was a mistake. But at the end of the day, he already prayed. He doesn't have to make a new prayer, so he should be expected to keep Shabbos with all of its details. So the Gemara responds, and the Gemara answers that this is a general rule, a big rule that applies in many places. The answer is like this. The community, the burden of the community is held very in very strong esteem in Jewish law. The Gemara responds, the community is different in that we do not burden them to pray again. Could you imagine you have to schlep again and try and find a minyan again? Everyone already prayed and now they're relaxing at home. And then all of a sudden the Gabbai comes knocking on the door. Oh, we need you to go back to shul. He says, come on, I just came from there, right? So we don't make them go back and daven again. That's only because we don't command them to bring to bring everyone back to shul.
Yeah, but what about the next position where the person's
Sorry?
allowed? What about the next step where the person's allowed to work or finish whatever? An individual seems different than a whole group, no?
So that's the question. So seemingly, even though the group did not have to pray again, but this guy who was praying on his own, seemingly he would have to pray again. Yeah.
Right.
So the Gemara continues to discuss the possibility of reciting the evening prayer early, even on Shabbat. Rabbi Chia bar Avin said that Rav prayed the Shabbat prayer on the eve of Shabbat before nightfall. So we keep on bringing stories about Rav. It seems that he was of the people who often brought Shabbos in early. Rav prayed the Shabbos prayer on the eve of Shabbos before nightfall. Rabbi Yoshia would pray the evening prayer of the conclusion of Shabbos on Shabbos afternoon before nightfall. With regard to the fact that Rav prayed the Shabbos prayer on the eve of Shabbos before nightfall, the dilemma is raised. In those cases, did he recite Kiddush over a cup of wine straight after he finished his prayers, or did he not recite Kiddush over the cup of wine until after the stars emerged? Come and hear a resolution to this, as Rav Nachman said that Shmuel said. Shmuel was a good friend of Rav, and they have many discussions together. Shmuel said, one who prays the Shabbos prayer on the eve of Shabbos before nightfall and recites Kiddush over the cup of wine. And the halacha is in accordance with his ruling that you're allowed to bring in Shabbos early, and you're also allowed to make Kiddush over a cup of wine before the stars emerge. Now, this next thing we briefly mentioned earlier, but we're going to get into a better discussion of it now, I think. A similar dilemma was raised concerning the fact that Rabbi Yoshia prayed the evening prayer at the end of Shabbos on Shabbos. After davening, while it is still Shabbos, does he recite Havdalah over the cup of wine, or does he not recite Havdalah over the cup of wine? Right, so as we mentioned last time when we were speaking about this, that we have a special prayer sanctifying Shabbos when it goes in, and sanctifying Shabbos when it goes out. Kiddush we make when Shabbos goes in, and the one that we say when Shabbos goes out is called Havdalah. Usually, Havdalah is going to be accompanied also by smelling the spices and by looking at our nails in the fire, by lighting a fire. So, of course, if it was still Shabbos, he would not be able to do the fire. But what about the actual blessing over the cup of wine, sanctifying the Shabbos as it leaves? So after praying while it is still Shabbos, does he recite Havdalah over the cup of wine? Or does one not recite Havdalah over the cup of wine? Come and hear a resolution to this, as Rav Yehuda said, that Shmuel said, one prays the evening prayer of the conclusion of Shabbos while it is still Shabbos, and recites Havdalah over the cup of wine, so you can make it before Shabbos ends.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
when I was visiting my cousin in South Carolina, she was a member of a Havdalah group that they had put together. So I attended Havdalah a number of times.
Beautiful.
It was a lovely group that they, they would talk about all kinds of Jewish items. Somebody would come up with a theme for the night that would be, an interesting topic, and dinner and prayers. It was lovely.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Joan.
Well, Rabbi,
Yeah,
Shabbat is 24 hours, right?
approximately.
Okay.
A little more.
So if you start Shabbat early before nightfall, then shouldn't it end 24 hours later, even though it's the next day isn't quite nightfall yet?
That's a good question. So the answer is that the day of Shabbos, right, begins on Friday at sunset and ends on Saturday when the stars come out at nightfall. So that is a little bit more than 24 hours. If you bring it in, so then your Shabbos is going to be longer. The same way, we know that you can bring in Yom Kippur early if you want, but that doesn't mean that you can bring out Yom Kippur earlier, right? And eat while it's still Yom Kippur. You can add to the holiness of Shabbos, but we cannot subtract from the holiness of Shabbos. In fact, it's actually a mitzvah to add to the holiness of Shabbos, to add a few minutes before and a few minutes after. There's a very special mitzvah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Rab Zera said, that Rabbi Asi said, that Rabbi Elazar said, that Rabbi Chanina said, that Rav said. Alongside this specific pillar before me, Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yosef, prayed the Shabbos prayer on the eve of Shabbos before nightfall. That was what Rab Zera said. But when Ulla came from Eretz Yisrael to Babylonia, he related a different version of this story. He said that he heard that this transpired beside a palm tree, not beside a pillar. And it was not Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yossi, but it was Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Yossi. And it was not the Shabbos prayer on Shabbos Eve before nightfall. Rather, it was the prayer of the conclusion of Shabbos on Shabbos. And to me, that just sounds like two different stories. But anyways, he said that this is a different version of the story, that it was a palm tree. It was Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Yossi, and it was the Shabbos, the conclusion prayer of Shabbos before Shabbos, and before the end of Shabbos. Okay. So now we've discussed the time for the morning prayer. We've discussed the time for the additional prayer. We've discussed the time for the afternoon prayer. And now it's time to discuss the time for the evening prayer. We learned in our Mishnah, the evening prayer may be recited throughout the night and is not fixed to a specific hour. The Gemara asks, what is the meaning of is not fixed? If you say that if one wishes you may pray throughout the night, then let the Mishnah just teach the evening prayer may be recited throughout the night. Rather, what is the meaning of not fixed? Why does it say that the time of the evening prayer is not set? There's no set time. Just say, what do you mean there's no set time? There is a set time from when it comes night until it comes morning. So why does it say there's no set time for the evening prayer?
Because it's not
The
an
answer
exact
is
time.
that it's in accordance with the opinion of the one who said that the evening prayer is optional. We have two opinions. As Rabbi Yehuda said, that Shmuel said with regard to the evening prayer. Rabban Gamliel says it's obligatory, and Rabbi Yehoshua says it's optional. Abaye said the halacha is in accordance with the statement of the one who said the evening prayer is obligatory. And Rava said the halacha is in accordance with the statement of the one who said that the evening prayer is optional. So now what we're left with is a big confusion. Is the evening prayer optional or is the evening prayer obligatory? The sages taught there was once an incident involving a student who came before Rabbi Yoshua. The student said to him, is the evening prayer optional or obligatory? And Rabbi Yoshua said to him, the evening prayer is optional. That same student came before Rabban Gamliel and said to him, is the evening prayer optional or obligatory? And Rabban Gamliel said to him, obligatory. And from here is the source that once you get an answer from a rabbi, you shouldn't keep shopping for answers. It might change. Right? So Rabban Gamliel said, no, you have to pray the evening prayer. It's an obligation. The student said to Rabban Gamliel, but didn't Rabbi Yeshua tell me that the evening prayer is optional? Rabban Gamliel said to the student, wait for the masters of the shields. Who are the masters of the shields? This is a reference to the Torah scholars who are battling the war of the Torah. Enter the study hall, at which point we will discuss this issue. In other words, when the great Torah scholars come, we'll hash it out. We'll get out the octagon and we'll see what happens. When the masters of the shields entered, the questioner stood before everyone present and asked, is the evening prayer optional or obligatory? Rabban Gamliel said to him, obligatory. In order to ascertain whether or not Rabbi Yehoshua still maintained his opinion, Rabbi Yehoshua was a contemporary of Rabban Gamliel, who was one of these bearers of the shields, right? One of these Torah warriors, and he was present now at this meeting. And Rabban Gamliel says to the student, it's obligatory. And Rabban Gamliel says to the sages, is there anyone who disputes this matter? And Rabbi Yehoshua said to him, no, no one disagrees. In deference to the Nasi, Rabbi Gamliel was a powerful figure, and he was also the head of the Jewish people. And so Rabbi Yehoshua did not want to argue with him. So he did not want to argue with him publicly. So he said, nope, there is no one who disagrees. Everyone holds that it is optional. And now Rabbi Gamliel brings in his key witness. And Rabbi Gamliel said to Rabbi Yehoshua, but was it not in your name that they told me that the evening prayer is optional? Oh, why are you saying that the evening prayer is obligatory if you told him that it's optional and now you're telling me that you agree with me? What's going on here? Rabbi Gamliel said to Rabbi Yehoshua, stand on your feet. There was Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Yehoshua did not get along very well. There were a number of times that there were rifts, which ended up leading with Rabbi Gamliel getting fired from his position, actually. Because Rabbi Yehoshua argued with him. We're going to get to that later, but the story was that Rabbi Yehoshua said that Rabban Gamliel had made a mistake when it comes to calculating when Yom Kippur was. And he said it's not possible that Yom Kippur is the day that Rabban Gamliel says it is. So Rabban Gamliel says, I am commanding you in the name of the law that you must come to me on the day that you think is Yom Kippur with your money bag and your walking stick to show that you're deferring to me and that you're not keeping Yom Kippur on your day, but you're going to keep Yom Kippur on my day. And Rabbi Yeshua was thus publicly humiliated. And so because of that story, they ended up removing Rabban Gamliel from his position for some time. And that was how Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah became the head of the yeshiva. Because Rabban Gamliel couldn't be the head of the yeshiva because he had disgraced Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua couldn't take his place because he was the man in question over here. So they had to find someone else. Okay. So Rabban Gamliel said to Rabbi Yehoshua, stand on your feet and they will testify against you. In other words, I blew your cover. Don't come here telling me that you agree with me when really you're telling people otherwise. Rabbi Yehoshua stood on his feet and said, if I were alive and the student were dead, the living can contradict the dead, and I could deny issuing that ruling. Now that I am alive and he is alive, how can the living contradict the living? I have no choice but to admit that I said it. He says, listen, I wish the kid was dead because then I could deny having said it. But guess what? He's alive and he's a witness and he speaks the truth. I did indeed say that the evening prayer is optional. In the meantime, Rabban Gamliel, as the Nasi, was sitting and lecturing. And Rabbi Yeshua all the while was standing on his feet because Rabban Gamliel did not instruct him to sit. He remained standing in deference to the Nasi. He didn't sit down. The Nasi didn't tell me to sit, so I'm going to stay standing. This continued for some time until it aroused great resentment against Rabban Gamliel. They didn't like the fact that he was keeping Rabbi Yehoshua standing. All the people assembled began murmuring. And they said to Chutzpis the disseminator. So in those days, they had the teachers were head and shoulders above the students. So the teacher would speak to a translator, which is what they were called. They weren't really translating, they were explaining. So he would speak softly to this guy, and the other person would be like their microphone and explain everything to the students. So Chutzpis was the name of the disseminator of Rabban Gamliel, and the people were disgusted that Rabban Gamliel was showing this not level of respect, this disrespect to Rabbi Yehoshua. So they began murmuring, and they said to the disseminator, stop conveying Rabban Gamliel's lecture, and he stopped. Should we finish the story, or should we stop here?
What was his name? Chutzpah? It sounds like chutzpah.
Yes, it does sound like chutzpah.
So that
Let's continue.
Let's finish the story, okay? The people have spoken. The Gemara relates that in their murmuring they said, how long will Rabban Gamliel continue afflicting him? Last year in Rosh Hashanah he afflicted him. Rabban Gamliel ordered Rabbi Yeshua to come carrying his staff and bag on the day on which Yom Kippur occurred, according to Rabbi Yeshua's calculations. Regarding the firstborn in the incident involving the question of Rabbi Tzadok, he afflicted him just as he did now and forced him to remain standing as a punishment for his failure to defend his differing opinion. Here too he is afflicting him. Let us remove him from his position as Nasi. It was so agreed. But the question arose, who shall we establish in his place? In other words, they were standing up for the honor of Rabbi Yeshua, who was a great sage in his own right. So they said, okay, this rabbi, he's taking these punishments too far. We can't have him the head of the academy. But who shall we establish in his place? Shall we establish Rabbi Yeshua in his place? The sages rejected that option because Rabbi Yeshua was party to the incident for which Rabban Gamliel was deposed. Appointing him would be extremely upsetting for Rabban Gamliel. Shall we establish Rabbi Akiva in his place? The sages rejected that option because Rabbi Akiva, who descended from a family of converts, would be vulnerable. Perhaps, due to Rabban Gamliel's resentment, he would cause him to be divinely punished as he lacks the merit of his ancestors to protect him, because he's not a grandson of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Rather, suggested the sages, let us establish Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah in his place. His outstanding characteristics, he was only 18 years old at the time, set him apart from the other candidates. He is wise, rich, and a 10th generation descendant of Ezra. The Gemara explains, he is wise, so if Rabbi Gamliel raises a challenge in matters of Torah, he will answer it and not be embarrassed. And he is rich, so if the need arises to pay homage to the Caesar's court and serve as a representative of Israel to lobby and negotiate, he has sufficient wealth to cover the costs of the long journeys, taxes, and gifts. So he is able to go and pay homage. And he is a 10th generation descendant of Ezra, so he has the merit of his ancestors, and Rabban Gamliel will be unable to cause him to be punished. They came and they said to him, would the master consent to being the head of the yeshiva? He said to them, I will go and consult with my household. I'm going to go talk to my wife. So he went and spoke to his wife, and she said to him, look at that, we finished 2 pages today.
What did she say?
There is room for concern. Perhaps they will kick you out just as they removed Rabban Gamliel. He said to her, based on the folk saying, let a person use an expensive goblet one day and let it break tomorrow. In other words, one should take advantage of an opportunity that presents itself and need not concern himself whether or not it will last. So maybe they'll kick me out, but at least I'll be the head of the yeshiva for a day. She said to him, you have no white hair, and it is inappropriate for one so young to head the sages. The Gemara relates, that day he was 18 years old. A miracle transpired for him, and 18 rows of hair turned white. And the Gemara comments that explains why that what we say by the Seder, that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, today I am as one who is 70 years old. He didn't say I am 70 years old. He said I am like one who is 70 years old, because he looked older than he actually was. And that's a good place. The story is not all the way over, but it's a good place to stop the story. Okay. Thank you all for joining. Tomorrow, God willing, we will be here, 11 a.m. And the topic will be, let me just remember this. Struggling, lift up another. Should we focus on lifting ourselves out of the quicksand, or can we accomplish that by lifting up someone else? See you tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. Everyone, take care. Have a wonderful day. God bless you, and we will see you either tomorrow or Tuesday.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.